Hello, and welcome to this webinar on immigration policy that will apply in the event of a no-deal Brexit. And this webinar is specifically about immigration policy that will apply to EU nationals who wish to come to the UK. So I'm going to run through a few things for you today. First, going to go through a deal scenario just to remind everybody about the policy that will apply in that situation. Then go through the policy scenarios for a no deal, go through the detail of the two relevant schemes, so the EU settlement scheme and then European temporary leave to remain, highlight some useful resources, and at the end just go through a few frequently asked questions that we get in this area. So in a no-deal scenario, the government has said that there will be no change to the immigration status of EU citizens already in the UK or those that arrive before the end of the transition period, currently the 31st of December 2020. EU nationals who already live here and who arrive by that point will be eligible for the settlement scheme and they can apply for settled status or pre-settled status, depending on what they're eligible for. And I'll go through at a later point what that means in terms of eligibility, but also rights granted. In a deal scenario, the deadline for applications to that scheme is June 2021. And then a new immigration system will be operational from January 2021 onwards. So any citizens, EU citizens arriving after that point would have to apply for immigration status under that new immigration system. Things in a no-deal scenario are slightly more complicated. So the key point here is whether the EU citizens and their family members arrive in the UK before or after Brexit Day. So in the case that they are residing in the UK before Brexit Day, then the EU settlement scheme will continue to be implemented for those individuals and they can secure their status through that scheme. The difference in this case is that planned application deadline will be brought forward by 6 months to the 31st of December 2020. The difference really applies to those EU citizens and their family members arriving after Brexit Day. So in a no-deal scenario, the EU settlement scheme will not apply to those individuals and EU citizens and their close family members who move to the UK after Brexit in a no-deal scenario but wish to stay beyond 2020 will need to apply for some kind of UK immigration status to do so. And they will have until December 2020 to apply for that status and be granted it. To make that easier, after Brexit, the Home Office will be opening a new voluntary immigration scheme that those individuals will be eligible for, which will be called European Temporary Leave to Remain, or EURO-TLR. And this will provide them a route to apply for that immigration status. And we'll go through in a second the specifics of that scheme, but essentially it will grant them 36 months of leave to remain in the UK from the date that their leave is granted. Okay, so just going back to the settlement scheme and the specific details of that, although I and others tend to say EU citizens, actually the individuals eligible for the EU settlement scheme are both EU, EEA, Swiss citizens and their family members who can apply through it. Successful applicants to the scheme, as I said, will either be granted settled or pre-settled status. So individuals who have 5 years continuous residency or more than 5 years continuous residency will be granted settled status, and those with less than 5 years will be granted pre-settled status. Those who are granted settled status can stay in the UK for as long as they like once that's been granted, whereas those granted pre-settled status will have a further 5 years leave to remain from the point at which that is granted, and at the point at which they become eligible for settled status through 5 years of continuous residency, they can then apply for that under the scheme. The EU settlement scheme grants these rights to individuals, so they'll be able to work in the UK, use the NHS, a role in education, continue studying, access public funds, and travel in and out of the UK as they do now. The scheme is open currently, it's also free of charge, and there's an awful lot of information about it on the gov.uk web pages, which is linked there on the screen for you where individuals can check whether they need to apply and what they will be eligible for. Okay, so on to the other relevant scheme, which is European Temporary Leave to Remain. And just to recap, this scheme is for those individuals in a no-deal scenario who would arrive in the UK after Brexit Day. So those individuals, as I said, will be able to apply for 36 months temporary immigration status called European Temporary Leave to Remain. Applications for that scheme will be free and can be made after arrival in the UK. So there's no need for EU citizens who are intending to travel to the UK to make any special arrangements to do so. And as I said, it's voluntary up until the 31st of December 2020. So if they are travelling to the UK for any purpose but don't intend to stay past that date, they do not need to apply for this or any other kind of immigration status. It's only if they're intending to stay past the 31st of December 2020 that they will need to. And as it says here at the bottom of the screen, those EU citizens who do move to the UK after Brexit but don't apply for Euro TLR will either have to leave the UK by the 31st of December 2020 or apply for a different UK immigration status under the UK's future immigration system, which will be operational from January 2021 onwards. After an individual's 36 months of European temporary leave to remain has expired, they will then be required to apply for another immigration status if they wish to remain in the UK. And again, that will be under that future immigration system that's operational from 2021. If they do subsequently qualify for leave under that future immigration system in a route that leads to settlement, then they can use the time that they've spent on European temporary leave to remain to count towards the qualifying period for settlement in the UK as well. Again, there's information available on the gov.uk web pages and the link to the relevant policy documentation is on the screen now. Clearly the scheme isn't open yet and only will become open after Brexit. So this documentation just describes the policy detail that's been set out by government rather than linking, like the other one, to an open scheme. You can also get an awful lot of detailed Brexit information from elsewhere. So again, up on your screen is some information from UKISA, which will be particularly useful to you if you want to communicate some of these policy positions to European students, and goes through immigration relevant information, but also information that those students might be interested in on fees and healthcare as well. Okay, so on to the frequently asked questions that we get asked, and one of them is whether in the future EU students will need to apply for a Tier 4 visa. Well, as you probably worked out from the rest of this webinar, that really depends on the point at which those EU students are entering the UK. So if they're entering from January 2021 onwards, the answer to this question would be yes. Those individuals will need to apply under the future immigration system. And we expect that immigration system to contain a study route that looks like the current Tier 4 visa route without significant change to it. If, however, they're arriving in the UK before the 31st of December 2020, then the action they need to take or what they might need to apply for really depends on whether they have entered in a deal or a no-deal scenario and at what point in time. So in a no-deal scenario specifically, EU students arriving before Brexit Day can apply for the settlement scheme, and if they wish to stay in the UK or need to stay in the UK for their studies after December 2020, will need to apply for that route to do so. In a no-deal scenario, if those EU students are arriving after Brexit Day but before December 2020, then they can apply for European temporary leave to remain. The other question we frequently get asked is whether Erasmus students wanting to apply for either the EU settlement scheme or European temporary leave to remain in the event of a no-deal. Again, the scenario here really depends on how long they're intending to stay in the UK. So if they will be in the UK past December 2020 in the event of a no-deal, they will need to apply for some kind of immigration status. The point at which they arrived in the UK, either before or after Brexit and no deal, determines which of those two things they would be required to apply for. The other question we often get asked is whether EU staff will need to apply for a visa before they start work in the UK in the event of a no deal. And again, this really depends at the point in which they enter the UK. So if in the event of a no deal, if they're entering after Brexit Day, but before December 2020, they will be able to apply for European temporary leave to remain. And after December 2020, we'll need to apply for a visa route that allows them to work in the UK under that future immigration system. Clearly, with both students and staff, the key thing for those individuals is to remember that European temporary leave to remain grants them 36 months, and currently, at the end of that 36 months of leave to remain, if they wish to stay, they will need to apply under the future immigration system at that point. Thank you for listening.